Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be presenting an ethical analysis of adultery through the lens of Immanuel Kant categorical imperative. My presentation is titled as Applying Kant's Categorical Imperative to Adultery, a deontological ethical analysis. Here we will explore how Kantian ethics evaluates the morality of adultery and whether it can be ever be justified from a moral standpoint rooted in a reason, duty, and universal principle. One thing I want to clarify this that like I am using a third party app, so the presentation might differ from the original. I will provide a link for the original and this recorded presentation. So let us continue. Let's begin with the concept of adultery. Adultery is defined as a volunteer sexual relationship between the married person and someone who is not in their spouse. While it is a consequence may vary, the moral dilemma it poses is timeless and complex. So the question is that is adultery ever morally permissible, particularly when love, desire, or dissatisfactions are involved? To answer this, we turn into Immanuel Kant's deontological ethics, a framework where morality is not judged by outcomes but by adhere to universal moral duties. Central to this framework is that categorical imperative and a principle that tells us to act in such a way that could be universalized. This is made into law that everyone should follow. So the question is that who was Immanuel Kant? Immanuel Kant was a German elegant philosopher born in 1724, and he made a foundational contributions to ethical metaphysics and epistentology. His moral psychological deontology emphasized duty over consequences. According to Kant, an action only has moral worth if it is done out of a sense of duty, guided by person, not by emotion, instinct, or consequence. He famously argued that we must treat people not as a tool for use, but as ends in themselves. That is, a rational begins deserving respect and a moral consideration. This foundational idea gives the rise to categorical imperative. Kant's categorical imperative is a moral principle that demands we act only on the maxims that we can will to become universal laws. In other words, if I choose to do something, I should be able to imagine world where everyone does the same, and that world must still be logically and ethically sound. Kant gave us three formulations of the categorical imperative. First is universal law, the act only on principles you can will to be universal. Second, humanity as end. Never trust humanity merely as a means but always as end. Third, kingdom of ends. Act as thought you are listening to moral community. Each of these formulations offers a unique test for whether a behavior like adultery is morally permissible. The first test of the categorical imperative is this: can I will that my action became a universal law? If everyone committed adultery, what would the world look like? Well, marriage as a trust-based institution would collapse, and the concept of the fidelity would lose its meaning. If everyone felt justified in cheating, and the structure of the marriage would be unmarried and the trust between the spouses would disappear. Thus, the act of adultery fails this test. It cannot be universalized without contradiction and destruction of the system it relies upon. The very idea of the adultery depends on the existence of the marriage, which would ease, which would case to have meaning if the universal identifiably were allowed. What are the contradictions in this conception? Because it depends on the institution of the marriage, which is built on exclusivity and trust. If adultery were universal, marriage would no longer exist in its meaningful form. Therefore, the maxim it is applicable to commit adultery is self defeating and cannot be morally valid. This is known as contradiction in conception. The action contradicts the very idea it relies on. So we are coming to formulation to humanity as an end. This formulation says that act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in yourself or in others, always as an end, never merely as a means. Adultery often involves direct betrayal and manipulation, all of which uses the person as a means of personal gratification. The spouse is deceived and affair partner may be objectified and emotionally harm is caused. This behavior disrespects the autonomy and the rational agency of others, both the betrayed spouse and the affair partner, failing to treat them as ends in themselves. So, building on that, adultery also involves the objectification. It reduces the people to their sexual function or emotional utility. This is deeply problematic in Kantian ethics. Kant insists that each person must be treated with inherent dignity. By cheating, the adulterer ignores the rational will and consent and moral standing of the people involved. This is not just because the private matter, it is a moral violation of other human beings' personhood. Formulation 3 is kingdom of ends. This formulation asks us to imagine a moral society where each person acts according to the rules that could be legislated for everyone. Kant calls this kingdom of ends. If we consider the adultery in this framework, we see that it undermines the mutual respect, trust, and moral law. The very things makes a moral community possible. Therefore, by engaging in adultery, one acts outside the boundary of the moral continuity Kant envisioned. It erodes the social trust necessary for the ethical society. Kant's believe that rational beings are the source of moral law. We are not ruled by instinct or impulse. We are capable of rational self-governance. Therefore, adultery is betrayal not only for others, but of one's own moral rationality. A person who cheats acts out of desire rather than duty and compromises of the moral structure that gives him meaning and coherence. So, adultery is not just a theoretical or an abstract concept, it is a life consequence like emotional trauma, divorce, loss of trust, and damage to families. Kant would argue that these effects are predictable, but even if they weren't, we should not commit adultery regardless of the consequences. Our duty to our duty to fidelity rooted in the moral laws outweighs the feeling of unhappiness and attraction to others. Acting from duty rather than emotion or uh, convenience is the cornerstone of Kantian ethics. A common objection is that what about the unhappy marriages? Isn't adultery understandable then? Kant would respond no. No, because moral law is not flexible based on the personal dissatisfaction. If a marriage is failing, the ethical response is honest communication and a separation or a divorce, not bilateral, not betrayal. Adultery, even though in situations treats people as a means and undermines their very moral rule that protects us. So we come to the conclusion slide. In conclusion, according to Immanuel Kant's ethical system, adultery is not morally acceptable under any circumstances. These categorical imperative demands that we act only on the principles that could be universally applied, that we treat others as end, and that we contribute to a moral community. Adultery violates each of the principles. While emotions, circumstances might be complex, our moral duty remains clear and unchanging. A life of integrity, respect, and moral consistency is the foundation of the Kantian ethics, and this standard by adultery is unquestionably wrong. So thank you everyone for listening me, and these are the references. If any questions are coming, kindly write down. Thank you very much.